The Huffington Post writes, "Could it be time to deny white men the franchise? The redistribution of the world's wealth is long overdue, and it's not just South Africa where white males own a disproportionate amount of wealth." Some of the biggest blows to the progressive cause in the past year have often been due to the votes of white men. If white men were not allowed to vote, it is unlikely that the United Kingdom would be leaving the European Union. It is unlikely that Donald Trump would now be president of the United States, and it is unlikely that the Democratic Alliance would now be governing 4 of South Africa's biggest cities. If white men no longer had the vote, the progressive cause could be strengthened. It would not be necessary to deny white men indefinitely. The denial of the vote for white men for 20 years, just less than a generation, would go away to seeing a decline in the influence of reactionary and neoliberal ideology in the world. The influence of reckless white males were one of the primary reasons that led to the Great Recession, which began in 2008. This would also strike a blow against toxic white masculinity, one that is long needed. At the same time, a denial of the franchise to white men could see a redistribution of global assets to their rightful owners. At the same time, a denial of the franchise to white men could see a redistribution of global assets to their rightful owners. After all, white men have used the imposition of Western legal systems around the world to reinforce modern capitalism. A period of 20 years without white men in the world's parliaments and voting booths would allow legislation to be passed which could see the world's wealth far more equally shared. The violence of white male wealth and income inequality will be a thing of the past. This redistribution of the world's wealth is long overdue, and it's not just South Africa where white males own a disproportionate amount of wealth. While in South Africa, 90% of the country's land is in the hands of whites, it is safe to assume that these are mainly men. Along with 97% of the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, this is also the norm in the rest of the world. As Oxfam notes, 8 men control as much as wealth as the poorest 50% of the world's population. In the United States, 10% of the population, nearly all white, own 90% of all assets. It is likely that these assets are largely in the hands of males. Although statistics by race are difficult to find from other parts of the world, it is very likely that the majority of the world's assets are in the hands of white males, despite them making up less than 10% of the world's population. It is obvious that this violent status quo will not change without a struggle, and the only way to do so will be through the expropriation of these various assets and equitably distribute them to those who need them. This will not only make the world a more equitable place, but will also go some way to paying the debt that white males owe the world. Over the past 500 years, colonialism, slavery, and various aggressive wars and genocides have been due to the actions of white men. Redistributing some of these assets will go some way to paying the historical debt that they owe society. Talk about the white man's burden, am I right? It's no surprise that liberalism and its ideological offshoots of conservatism and libertarianism are the most popular ideologies among white males. These ideologies, with their focus on individuals and individual responsibility rather than group affiliation, allow white men to ignore the debt that they owe society, and from acknowledging that most of their assets, wealth, and privilege are the result of theft and violence. I can't tell if this is satire. So basically, being an individual is a way to escape the things that people did hundreds of years ago. This is actual insanity. After receiving a little bit of hate from the internet, as that article had gone viral, they posted this article in response, the Huffington Post. On Thursday, the Huffington Post South Africa published a blog by Shelley Garland, an activist and feminist, currently completing an MA degree in philosophy. In the blog titled, "Could It Be Time to Deny White Men the Franchise?" Garland talks about how the biggest blows to the progressive cause have been often thanks to white men. On Friday, the blog was picked up by former senior editor of alt-right Breitbart News in the U.S., who was banned from Twitter over his harassment of actor Leslie Jones. Milo tweeted out, or he didn't tweet out, it's on his Facebook rather, "Brexit, Trump, it's almost like white men make good decisions or something. No wonder they hate us." Garland's underlying analysis about the uneven distribution of wealth and power in the world is pretty standard for feminist theory. It has been espoused in many different ways by feminist writers and theorists for decades now. In that sense, there was nothing in the article that should have shocked or surprised anyone, or so we thought. Does that also apply to neo-Nazis, I wonder? That line of logic? It would appear that perhaps much of the outcry derives from a very poor reading of the article, or perhaps none at all. Dismantling the patriarchal systems that have brought us to where we are today, a world where power is wielded to dangerous and destructive ends by men, and particular white men, necessarily means a loss to power to those who hold it, a loss of oppressive power. Those who have held undue power granted to them by patriarchy must lose it for us to truly be equal. This seems blindingly obvious to us. This doesn't necessarily mean we agree or endorse anything in Garland's blog, even though in the previous paragraph we just agreed with everything in Garland's blog. The point of Our Voices section is to invite a wide array of voices and views. We hope as reads continue to rack up on the blog that those who are tempered to fire off angry emails to us would first engage with the underlying analysis in Garland's blog. So don't be angry, just believe. Listen and believe, goddammit. And then we have this other article. It's fairly short. It's from the South African, and the mayor of a town that I can't pronounce. White people should be very, very careful. The mayor has a strong warning for some South Africans. Messina has a strong warning for white people and the Save South Africa group. The mayor has warned the groups that things may well get very, very rough. Friday the 7th of April saw countrywide marches against President Jacob Zuma. Yesterday, the president labeled those marches racist. Where have I heard that before? Messina addressed crowds at the Chris Hani Memorial Lecture at the Boksburg Civic Center on Monday. He accused the Save South Africa group of dividing the nation. So please, we just want to request Save South Africa nicely. Don't divide our nation, because if you continue to do so, those who have sided with you in 1994, they won't be here in 5 years. It might be very rough, and we are many. This is not a threat. We are many, and it might be very, very rough. While Messina emphasized that his comments were not a threat, he says he and others will not let any individual stand in the way of the project. It is very important that we send a very, very strong warning that we will crush any individual who stands in the way of the project of nation building and social cohesion in South Africa. Messina then began to speak directly to white people, saying that there are a lot of things white South Africans can need to understand and be careful of. Now, this thing of being shown the middle finger everywhere by white people because they've gained a new confidence must come to an end. I want to say that our white counterparts in South Africa must be very, very careful. They need to understand that the issue of nation building and social cohesion requires all of us, not these insults that you get from social media and you get called everything else. That time has come to an end. Our children and your children, they don't see what you are seeing in us. We are not monkeys, we are people, he said. I had no idea that the racial tension in South Africa was this bad. And I guess it's pretty standard practice for, white people to be called demonic and inhuman, and that they need to pay for the sins of the world, everything they owe the world. I think I've heard all of this before, slightly before one of the world wars. I might be mistaken, though. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I'd like to hear your opinion.